Good evening, and welcome to our live stream program on the future of Atlanta activism. Killer Mike in conversation with Maurice Hobson. My name is Kali-Ahset Amen. I'm a professor of sociology at the Johns Hopkins University and director of the John Lewis Fellowship, a training ground for emerging leaders committed to advancing human rights in domains as wide-reaching as law and policy, arts and sciences, human services, social enterprise, and beyond. On platforms large and small, local and international, John Lewis Fellows are endeavoring to follow in the footsteps of their namesake by tackling the most important social issues of our time. This week, with generous support from the Andrew Mellon Foundation, we are hosting a series of commemorative events honoring Congressman Lewis, who passed away 1 year ago this month. We began our journey yesterday by reflecting on the historical context that set the framework for Lewis's bold achievements. With this evening's program, we're looking to the present and the future to think about the work that is yet to be done. Thanks to our event partner, the Apex African American History Museum, and its director, Mr. Dan Moore, we are broadcasting live this evening from the center of the Sweet Auburn Historic District, located along Auburn Avenue in downtown Atlanta. It was here in Sweet Auburn that many African Americans established vibrant businesses, congregations, and social organizations in the 19th and 20th centuries. This place is steeped in Black history, Black civil rights history to be precise. But we know that the struggle for Black liberation in Atlanta and elsewhere is ongoing. And if we are to advance the necessary work, we would do well to abide the Sankofa principle, an ancient Akan teaching from Ghana that reminds us to reach into the past and bring forward to the present that which is useful. With Sankofa in mind, we have chosen to locate tonight's conversation about our future course within a place that is alive with the lessons of history. And our speakers this evening have the perfect blend of book knowledge, street knowledge, and agape love for community to tie all these threads together. Killer Mike is known as a musician, an activist, a rapper, and a social and political activist whose work focuses on subjects including social inequality, police brutality, and systemic racism. Born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, in 2019, Mike brought to Netflix the documentary series Trigger Warning with Killer Mike. And in that program, he explored issues in the United States that affect the Black community. And he put his revolutionary ideas about achieving social change into action. More recently, in October 2020, Killer Mike partnered with Bounce TV founder Ryan Glover and former Atlanta Mayor Andrew Young to found Greenwood, an online bank targeting Black and Latinx communities and anyone else who wants to support Black-owned businesses. Our other speaker this evening, Dr. Maurice Hobson, is an associate professor of African American Studies and an historian at Georgia State University. His research interests are grounded in the fields of African American history, 20th century U.S. history, and popular cultural studies. He's the author of an award-winning book titled The Legend of the Black Mecca, Politics and Class in the Making of Modern Atlanta. Over the course of the next hour, if you have comments or questions to pose to our speakers, please go ahead and put those in the chat, as we'll have time for Q&A after the discussion. Join me in welcoming Killer Mike and Maurice Hobson.
Let's get it.
Good afternoon. I am Maurice Hobson, and I am here with award-winning recording artist, activist, actor, Atlantan, business mogul, songwriter, Killer Mike, who I call the Minister of Defense. Brother Mike, you still Killer Kill from Adamsville.
I am.
It's good to be with you today,
Man, it's
brother.
good to be with you, Mo.
All right, man. I want to just ask you a couple of questions. Of course, today we are honoring the life and legacy of the late Congressman John Lewis.
Absolutely.
What was your relationship with him? How did you meet him?
So I am a child of a young woman named Denise from here, and her mother was from Tuskegee, Alabama. And Tuskegee, Selma, Birmingham, Montgomery, all these places in the 50s and 60s were hotbeds for kids organizing. My grandmother was probably 18 years old when she came to Atlanta. But she got invigorated with, getting free. She was from a family that had sharecropped, bought land. They were able to be educated because her mom made sure they were good financially, her mother and father. But she understood the importance of education. She understood the importance of being able to have equitable means in society. So she cared. She joined the NAACP, SCLC, much like people like John. So she introduced me to who he was in terms of this John Lewis. Mm-hmm. You understand? Mm-hmm. You're going out, you're campaigning for Andy, you see John pop up. This John Lewis.
Yeah.
You shake his hand, you make sure you speak. So I've known John Lewis my whole life just as a child. I helped campaign for him. My grandmother, anytime you got him, I don't care if I was there, this John Lewis.
That's right. That's
so
right.
She helped me understand the importance of who he was. I got to know him in a mentorship relationship because as a teenager, I was active in organizations like the Atlanta Fools Commission for Children and Youth, which was co-founded by the late wife, Jean Charles Young, the first wife of Andrew Young. You got a chance to meet people like John Lewis, people like C.T. Martin, people like my man Joseph Lowry, Martin Luther King III. So I'm in commune with all these people. And you're just one of the little ragtag teenagers that are running around doing anything from doing faxes at that time, to paperwork, to just however you can help. And he was just always kind. He was always good to me. But I really locked in and got to know him when they commiserated the march on the Edmund Pettus Bridge across Selma. Mm-hmm. On one of the first commemorations of it, I think in the 90s when they did it, and it became a big deal. I can't say it was the first ones, but ones that became a big deal. Reverend James Orange was my personal mentor.
Okay.
James had me to come down, and James helped me understand the importance through taking me through the museum, through taking me through the housing, by telling me what John Lewis had endured that day, about how he as a young man chose to walk and took that beating. And how the photographs in there and the courage there became an infectious thing that spread amongst more young people. And I took him, not that I didn't take him seriously, but I understood why my grandmother said, this John, this is the person that essentially martyred himself without dying for you on the behalf of it. And it was after that anytime I was with him, I locked in with all due, respect and humility attached.
I tell you what, I know you and I have talked about this, but tell me a funny story. One of your funny stories about John Lewis.
John Lewis helped end a rap beef. John Lewis, my grandmother Betty Cluntz, and Cross Patton, Big Boy's son. Me and Big Boy had, like brothers are gonna have a falling out. Usually it doesn't happen publicly. It doesn't happen with a bunch of other rappers involved. And we just got into a spat. I can't imagine being a part of the world's most successful rap group. And then your partner say, you know what? I'm gonna go make movies. We gonna walk away for hundreds of millions of dollars on it. I can't imagine the headspace would put me in. Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't be in a headspace where I could go create a company and still provide the artists with sounds and opportunity. And Big Boy did that. Mm-hmm. He created Purple Ribbon. Mm-hmm. Purple Ribbon didn't explode like Death Row. People get unsettled. People want to leave and stuff. And it leads to a tense environment in which two black men misunderstood one another. And it led to a spat between me and Big Boy, and a public spat. And it was embarrassing to me. It was embarrassing to him. It was embarrassing to the city. And one of the first phone calls I got, besides Miss Betty Cluntz, was John Lewis. Mm-hmm. Hello? Yes. This is such aid from John Lewis. Yes. He wants to speak to you. Okay, yeah, what's up? Michael? Yes, sir. I've heard about you and Big Boy, and And he went on to describe what happened. I'm like, am I being watched? And he says, I'm very disappointed in that behavior. And that put me, things didn't change overnight, but it took me off my rapper line and took my pride and ego and put it to the side. Said this man put his pride and ego to the side in dealing with some of the worst, most vehement racists, some of the most pacifist, slick, sly racism. And he did it with character, he did it with integrity, and he did it without retorts of violence and condescension. And I said, if he can do that for us, I'd be damned if I can't do that for him. And that started the pathway, along with Big Boy's son, at that time who was still a kid, telling his dad, I don't like you and Killer Mike fighting, was what began the pathway to he and I reconciling, me coming, letting him hear my music, getting advice from him, and what's put us on a pathway now to right now, as I sit here to you today, he just released his new single, and it's me, him, and Sleepy Brown. So John Lewis was forever a peacemaker. And in that moment, you know, you got to have people who know you sometimes to humble you. Yeah. And I humbled down and got on the right path.
Yeah, the elders do that, and you know that's the interesting thing about John Lewis is that he was a giant, but he never lost the comment.
Oh, he knew what was going on the corner.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he knew, and was gonna call you.
Yeah,
you know, if you was in Pal Lounge, he was gonna let you know you was down there.
Yeah. Yes, sir. I want to just shift really quickly. You made reference to your grandmother being from Tuskegee, Alabama, Macon County, and you also made reference to James Orange. There are several, I'm sure, dozens of civil rights activists in the city of Atlanta that the world doesn't know because they don't get the big names. Can you talk to me about some of those people?
All right, so let me give you two of who I would consider the alphas that you need to know, and two of their betas. Now, even these alphas were not the most prominent. They don't have statues up. There's a park named for James. He deserved that and more. But James Orange and Albert E. Love were both members of the SCLC. James actually was an organizer with Dr. King. He was one of the young people in Selma. If you look in the movie, my man Omar played him. But if you go to the museum down there, he has the glasses on, tall, broad man. James wouldn't even call me Killer Mike. He called all young people leader, but he adamantly refused to call me Killer Mike. I was Michael, a leader, and that's what it was, because he wanted me to understand at a very young age the importance of the path of nonviolence. The 6 steps of Kingian nonviolence, which always led back to resolution and reconciliation. I admired him, I loved him, I love him, and I value having been a student, truly a student of his, because he was there with Dr. King. So my knowledge ain't secondary. It's not a conspiracy. It's not propaganda. I have firsthand knowledge from the person that was in the room with him that could tell you how cold the water was. So James, I was fortunate to be mentored by. He taught me to organize. He and I. His secondary, or the debate I would name him, was a man named Walter Cleveland, who died a year or two ago. Walt was an amazing organizer, was a union man, was an extension of James and his help for the SCLC and the unions. So I want to make sure Walter Cleveland's name gets mentioned. Albert E. Love, out of the Boat Rock community, was a preacher here, took his wife to ice cream every Sunday. Ate it. All these men, two of you said, I want to go to lunch. They said, well, you got to meet me at Pascal's or the Beautiful. They was only eating at black restaurants. They lived it. But Albert E. Love, as I got more successful as a rapper and other people died off or I got more disconnected, he was the person that was adamant about being on me about, you have to stay engaged. That's why I laugh, when some people say, the day he died, he did that.
Right.
So he's a big part of the reason that I continue. So you have James Orange, Walter Cleveland, Albert Love, and a white woman named Alice Johnson, who moved here from West Virginia, where she was organizing with around Brown and I think Brown Lung. She was from Chicago. She was raised Catholic, and she believed in servitude and helping others. Her father was not thrilled about that. Came up in the 60s. Shirley Chisholm was her hero. She worked in Andy's administration. She's the person that introduced me to James Orange. But Alice is a person who, if I can help it, if it's a song or street or building, we'll have something named for her, because she's a person that I saw and went there with her. She made sure that children were organized with and not for. Meaning if she organized on behalf of children, they had to be a part of the organization.
Right.
She made sure that young men and women that were gangster disciples, that was Crips, or anything in between in terms of street fraternities, had an equal opportunity within those organizations to have said voice. All the children she's ever worked with are alive. She was just an amazing organizer and an amazing influence in my life. And I would be remiss if I ever accept any validations for being a social leader without those 4 people in particular who had direct influence on my life and making me an organizer.
Wow, man, that's great. I want to shift a little bit because I mean you're talking about some things. Several years ago, I saw you on Bill Maher, and you talked about Atlanta and what Atlanta means to Black Mecca. Black folk and all kinds of different things. And then I mean, you have a track called Two Sides where you talk about how like there is this Atlanta that everyone sees, and then there is Atlanta particularly for Black folk.
Yeah.
And it's different. They are different. But there have been a lot of changes, both good and bad, that have taken place in this city.
Yeah.
And some of it has really violated the civil and human rights of marginalized people, but Black people in particular. Yeah. Can you tell me about those changes, what you've seen from your childhood into where we are right now?
Well, let me say Atlanta is, if you watch television or been around the last 30, 40 years, you could think this is something new. Atlanta, I'll never forget looking at a black and white photo from the late 60s, early 70s, that there's a woman holding a sign that says that Atlanta ain't a fairy tale or something to the extent that Atlanta ain't Disneyland. But she was saying, hey, it's real here too. So my grandmother moved from rural Alabama, and she was from a family that owned land. So she was able, and land, I say 25 acres, but could grow enough food to sell to the store to make sure those 9 children got an education. Her and her sisters came up, became nurses. Her brothers became truck drivers, mechanics. So good, solid jobs. They were able to build a working class and middle class life here in Atlanta. My grandfather came from abject poverty in Edenton, Georgia, and was able to do the same here. Many of my friends who come from places like Cleveland, Gary, all parts of Michigan and Illinois, the East Coast, Jersey, New York, have come to Atlanta and radically changed their lives. Right? And with that said, we still have one of the largest wealth gaps between poor and rich divide here. That's equal in terms of white and Black wealth gap. It's equal in terms of Black middle class and Black poverty. So I always like to preference by saying Atlanta is a microcosm of America.
That's right.
America provides an amazing amount of opportunity for Americans. Doesn't always feel like it, doesn't always look like it, but I'm here to tell you that the poorest American has more opportunity than people 90 miles away from our shore. But that ain't good enough. The opportunity in the presence of hunger and poverty, hopelessness, violence, crime, oftentimes gets overshadowed. I was at a graduation yesterday of kids who are coming out of a trade program and going directly into apprenticeships. One of those children died. One of those children was an immigrant young woman who spoke and said, I didn't believe him and when it was happening at first, but I had to allow myself to get rid of the disbelief. So Atlanta's plagued with all those things, but I think that Atlanta has an opportunity.
Yes.
I think that we can fix poverty in an Atlanta-like way if we dedicate ourselves to that. I think that we can fix the wealth inequality and the gap here if we do it in an Atlanta-like way. I've never seen, and with a politician, sometimes they're going to do things you like, sometimes they're going to do things you don't like. My grandmother was cool on Maynard. My grandfather loved Maynard. My grandfather was cool on Andy. My grandmother loved Andy. That's how it goes. But one of the most significant things I've seen any mayor do, especially a Black mayor in a city that's considered Black, is tell people not to sell their homes. I saw a brother of mine I grew up with. His mother and my grandmother were friends. And I said, hey, I hadn't seen you in a while. I said, if you're ever interested, if you still have your mom's house, you're interested in selling it, let me. He said, man, I just sold it. He said, yeah, man, they gave me about $200 for it too. And man, I just shook my head because although I'm happy my friend got that, my friend probably got $100,000 less than he deserved.
Right.
You understand?
Absolutely.
But I'd never seen a mayor, and Keisha said, don't sell your homes. Figure out paying the taxes. So even in that, because she comes directly out of that neighborhood, and that's not saying, hey, she did everything right. That's saying that was the right thing to do.
Absolutely.
And all too many times, In other cities, I've not seen that happen, whereas in Atlanta, I have. I remember when Andy did the Dollar House program. In Northwest Atlanta, the bottom of Northwest Atlanta, Hollywood Road, Gun Club Road, all that, were just houses and vacant lots. One of my welders, who I pay top dollar to take care of my shops and stuff now, says, I bought my house. Everybody laughed at me. I bought my house for $1. Look at me now. I got the biggest house on this block. So I think that Atlanta gives you an opportunity. If you're a native here, though, opportunities are missed because hopelessness oftentimes sets in. But I promise you that unlike any other city for black people, if you get here, if you educate yourself, if you limit your disbelief and encourage your belief, if you take advantage of whatever educational opportunities you have, not only by way of higher education, but by way of post-secondary education, trade skills, and things of that nature,
sir.
There's opportunity in Atlanta for you. And there is political and social opportunity for you to elect people on a local level that will do things radically different, so if you should choose to. Right. Those opportunities are forever here. The only thing that's missing is you and your willpower.
That's right. You know, that is a really great segue. Last summer, I did an interview with Rose Scott, and she played this woman who basically said we should burn Atlanta down after the carrying of, what took place in unrest.
Well, I didn't hear her say it. I think you're talking about the beautiful sister who had the purple hair or something. But I don't think the sister was saying we should burn it down. But she was like, if it burns down, who gives a? We don't own anything anyway.
Yeah. Well, this is a particular one that Rose Scott did with a sister. She had moved here from Cleveland or something like that. And I was like, I understand the frustration, but
I did
let's
too.
pause.
I did too.
And so that segues into what we're talking about. In the summer of 2020, Atlanta erupted as a result of pandemic and protests with the murders of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and Rayshard Brooks, who took place here in Atlanta. Yeah. And you were called by Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms.
Well, T.I. was called.
Okay.
Yeah, they knew better than call. Didn't nobody call me. Yeah, I was chilling.
Well, how did you get there?
I was drinking Moet, smoking marijuana at the Bankhead Seafood food truck with Noriega from Capone and Noriega. It's the truth. See, because you got to know all of Atlanta. You know, Mr. Cato, who owned the liquor and the numbers, and, who if it wasn't for him, a lot of them marches wouldn't have got paid for too. Exactly. So I was engaging on Mr. Cato's side of the street. Right. And T.I. was getting a call from the main at John Wesley Dobbs side of the street.
I got you.
So when Tip, because we co-own Bankhead Seafood together, when Tip calls me and says, hey, they need us down at the because as the peaceful protest ended and darkness started to set in, things started to get violent, and what appeared to be happening, because the brother who organized it, brother from the South Side, is a great organizer. Yes. Forgetting his name now, but I want to give it to him. He's a great organizer. His thing seemed to have gotten infiltrated, and stuff started to get broke. Fires started to happen, and the city started to get spooked. So Tip got a call, and Tip was like, well, they called us. I said, no, they called you. I ain't going. And I'm going to tell you, I was glad I knew James, because in knowing James, I got a chance to know the personalities that were there. I got a chance to know the difference between Andy and Hosea, the difference between Martin and Ralph David Abernathy. You get a chance to know, they never let Andy go to jail. Yeah. They ain't want Andy going to jail. Andy, Jose was rich enough. Jose had a degree in chemistry, and he only been Jose, he could pay his bond. But the young boys went to jail. The John Lewises went to jail. So in that case, Tip is Andy like, we need to do something. No, Jose like, we don't need to do nothing. And Tip said, well, I'll come back to you in a minute. And over the course of an hour, my friend wheeled me down. He said, well, I'm not going if you're not going. I said, well, I can't let you, I'm not, you got to go. He said, I'm not going, you're not going. I said, well, I'm going with you. And we go, and I didn't expect to talk, but for those who may not know, or those who may have opinion, I really love this city.
Absolutely.
This city provided me with opportunities that my cousins who lived in other cities did not have, and they told me those opportunities value them. This city gave me a pathway from Collier Heights to Frederick Douglass to Morehouse. This city gave a working class black kid an opportunity not only to live his dream as a rapper, but to influence his city in a positive way that to me gave positive return on the investment that the civil rights era gave to us. So for me, it was important to get there and say what I said. I'm a son of this city. I'm a son of this city in these ways. And we owe it to the rest of the diaspora, because I'm a Pan-Africanist. I don't care who is it.
I understand.
I care about us in America. I care about us in the Geechee Gullah Islands. I care about us in the Caribbean. I care about us in Brazil, where there's the second largest amount of African DNA outside of Africa. I care about us in West, Central, East, West, and South Africa. I care about black folks. So I know that we don't have very many places of refuge to organize, to plot, plan, strategize, organize, and mobilize. We don't have another Underground Railroad.
That's right.
You know, we don't have a lot of allies. The Quakers are gone. You get what I'm saying? We don't have what we used to have, so the little we have, let's hold on to it. We need Tampa. We need Charlotte. We need Jacksonville. We need Daytona. We need Tuskegee. We need Selma. The crown jewel, economically, in terms of opportunity, a lot of times is Atlanta.
That's right.
Now, if that riot that was happening would have went north,
Yes.
I might not have said nothing, because I know those buildings north have insurance. But if that thing would have pivoted west and went on through the bluff, you would have did a favor to the people who own the bluff. Not the people who've been residents in the bluff 60 years, but the people who own the bluff now.
Yeah.
You would have burnt it down. They would have took the insurance money. They would have displaced those people. It would have never came back. And I know that because I own buildings in the bluff.
That's right.
You understand what I'm saying? T.I. could have shut up. He owns a block in the bluff. We could have let you burn it down. Burn it down.
Right.
We gonna collect, and we gonna build up these high rises, and we never gonna look back.
Right.
He and I have worked very hard to maintain affordable housing.
That's right.
We work very hard to make sure that retail stays, that we close some of these grocery gaps, these banking gaps. So my thing is, I didn't want to see the opportunity that Atlanta afforded a 12-year-old T.I. and a 12-year-old Mike denied a 12-year-old child. The same street that we were saying, please don't burn, is the same street that we was with the Paul kids, a 501c3 on Bankhead, taking money and food to families only weeks before. So for me, I didn't want to see the riot turn into self-harm and us be done like Detroit was done post the riots in the 60s. Man, them businesses left, and they left that city to rot and crumble. And it was evil, and it was wrong, and they knew what they were doing, and don't think they won't do it to us. So my call and plea was simply one of saying, remain a fort, because we are in a constant war. They're not attacking this city trying to take it because it's being mismanaged. They're attacking this city because it's an African-American city and you can control the faucet of money and where it goes. That's why your state is constantly attacking the city. So if we don't elect the right type of elected officials, demand and leverage our vote in a way that's positive so that we can create and keep a working class pool, a poor pool that can be poured into the working class, a working class that can amass some wealth and matriculate up into the middle class, and have a stable middle class, then we don't get to create another school system that has 70-80% of the schools named for African Americans. We don't get to create a curriculum in which Dr. Asa Hilliard, when he was alive, could put it in the school system, and I get to be under Dr. Baraki and learn directly from her. So I'm learning college level Egyptology or African American studies in the 10th grade versus having to go to my freshman year in Morehouse. No, you don't get that ecosystem. So for me, my plea for us to save us and be a place of refuge and a fort in that moment is so that we can create those conditions and further grow them and not lose them.
Man, that's beautifully said. I want to ask you this question. You know, you have a track on one of your albums called "God's in the Building."
Yeah, God in the building.
And you talk about how the church ladies see you.
Weep when
and they weep,
speak.
And they say
They
you
say,
call
see
to
God
preach.
in me and don't call to preach.
And I see that too. But you respond. You say you kiss him on the 100 brown cheeks, and you said, if Jesus came back, mother, where you think he'd be? Probably in these streets with me.
Absolutely.
We're talking about urban renewal. We're talking about gentrification. We're talking about the militarization of the police and the creation of the Red Dogs here. We're talking about the flooding of the streets.
It got crazy.
Can you talk to me about that aspect of, because we're talking about democracy. What you've been explaining is democracy and giving it to the people, and how our people are trying to fight against that.
Yeah, well, Atlanta's made some mistakes. You know, we all and when I say Atlanta, I'm not just pointing at the politicians at this point. I remember Clinton being called out for drug law and policy. And I want to tell everybody, man, the crack era was very scary.
Exactly.
It was for me as a 12-year kid, it was the most exciting thing in the world. You know what I mean? But you went from walking 14 houses from my house to Frederick Douglass High School. You went from walking to school and the adults that would wave to you and make sure you were ushered along in elementary school, a lot of them had become addicted. And those same adults would then be asking you, do you got something? You know?
Are you holding?
And that's a corruption of childhood, and it's a corruption of the adult and child relationship. With older people being locked up, you didn't have older dealers to chastise the younger men. Things got out of control and crazy. I remember when burglar bars went up on everybody's houses, and I remember how fearful the time was full of fear. And what happened was, with the influx of the Miami boys coming in here, there a hyper violence happened. Because now not only do you have regular violence between inner neighborhood, Bowen Homes, Adamsville, Simpson Road, now you have an occupying group of people with money in here. That just exploded into violence. The creation of a Red Dog unit happens, and those cops beat the shit out of everybody. I have a new song where I laugh about them just beating me up. I say, man, they took my drugs, but thank God they didn't take me to jail. I said, I didn't have a record. And you laugh, but when a real criminal gets locked up, man, they don't cry. They just sit in the corner and wait on the bond or not. And I knew I was dead wrong. And I knew that they were wrong for beating my ass. But if it hadn't been for Detective Williams, God bless the dead, who was at that time at summer school, I think I met him when it wasn't Gene Childs Young, it was whatever it was called, Southwest, before Gene Childs Young. He really helped radically change my mind over the course of summers in relation to the police, and helped me understand that it was the public that was demanding us into this. And essentially, when the public puts that type of pressure on city council and mayors, you're going to see militarizing of the policemen. Because at that time, they didn't know what to do.
Exactly.
Let's not make an excuse for them. They're just like, the public. Bill Clinton said, what was I supposed to do? Your leaders were calling for me to do something. And our leaders have never reconciled the fact that they asked for the masters to handle their children that way. And at some point, we're going to have to admit that. We're going to have to say that although the drug laws that were passed were wrong, right? They were evil in saying 5 grams of crack times 500 grams versus 500 grams of virtually evil. And the white folks that wrote it knew it was evil. But we were wrong in calling for the police to be brought into to corral our children. And our grandparents understood that once they started seeing how ugly it was. And thankfully you had Al Sharpton at that time, Jesse Jackson at that time, Louis Farrakhan at that time. You had people coming from our community speaking up against it. But I think that all of us have a debt to pay. All of us have an amends to make. I, as a kid who was selling drugs, I didn't know. I never thought about the fact I'm taking something out of someone's household. So I, as a 13-year-old Michael, have to make amends with that. But now that they 70, 80 years old, it's time for them to make amends and say, we did that wrong. We're not going to make that mistake again.
Right.
We're not going to make a paramilitary occupying force in our communities again, when we could be making what I went to last night, like a Georgia youth bill. We could be taking these young men that would be standing in front of these stores and putting them in the trades programs, because we know we're going to be building that billion-dollar port in Savannah. We know for the next 30 years at least, we're going to have infrastructure bills in this state. So we should be preparing our children for that right now. And I think that that's ultimately the mistake we all learned from our mistakes and missteps during the drug war.
So I'm going to pivot, and then we're going to come back to different forms of activism. But about a decade ago, Atlanta Public Schools was a part of the greatest cheating scandal in the history of the United States, which failed a generation of black children, black and brown children. And of course, we've been talking about the school to prison nexus. We've been talking about militarization of the police. Can you talk to me about education? And I'm talking about broadly defined education and what that means.
I want to talk to you about one school in particular,
Sure.
Frederick Douglass High School. It's a little over 50 years old. Frederick Douglass High School, the logo is 2 African shields, a North Star, and broken chains, meaning we're breaking the mental, spiritual, and physical bonds of slavery. It was designed by a student. Frederick Douglass High School faculty was primarily made up, sprinkled a few grains of salt in there, but mostly black educators that were out of historically black colleges and universities. Had 2, for the first 30, 40 years or so, only had 2 principals, Lester Butts and Samuel Hill. Under those 2, they had state championship worthy football and basketball teams. They had National School of Excellence. They produced some of the most stable citizens, whether it was regular guy taking your trash out or city council people like Michael Julian Bond. And because of the environment of schools turning into test-taking centers. That school that once marched 2,000 students through its door upon the principle, without struggle there is no progress, and it is easier to build strong men to repair strong children to repair broken men. We literally had to learn this. That school has turned now into a school of 800. Congrats to the girls on 2 state championships. Still putting out some damn hard-working kids, but it was robbed and siphoned of some of its best talent, taken to other charter schools and academies. It now has fell from 2,000 to about 800. It graduates on average, 75 to 150 kids, where my graduating class was 500. In my graduating class, Chief Judge Asha Jackson, Robert Hicks now coaches at Riverwood, former Buffalo Bill, Cameron Dollar, NCAA champion and scholar, me, Little John was not in my class, but definitely graduated, Doug Shannon McCullen, T.I., our mayor. What prompted a school system that was, the teachers were out of Booker T. Washington and Morris Brown, Morehouse.
That's where they
your,
go.
your students are directly from neighborhoods that the teachers live in. My elementary school teacher lived in my, what disrupts it to the point that you had children coming from as far as Fairburn, Georgia, to be a part of your magnet program if they possibly could. You have, every kid ain't magnet, so you have a program where you have, if you're art, they're gonna siphon, you came in 8th grade at that time, you got in the art program and they rolled you through with the intent on getting you an art scholarship. What changed about a school system? What changed was they turned into test-taking centers. We went into bullshit, no child left behind policy that leaves dozens of children behind.
Exactly.
Because the people who own the test-taking companies and textbooks are donating to your politicians. We have allowed so much money. We have allowed federally Democrats and Republicans to use and abuse us to a point where we don't even invest in our own children. We don't care about education in the way that we pretend to, and our children show us by the results. Because if we cared, we'd be educating our children and not testing our children.
That's right.
You test a lab rat. You educate a child.
That's right.
And the fundamental cornerstone of education is to get to say, why? Children stop being allowed to ask questions. So then you put teachers in an environment who, instead of teaching for 8 hours a day, are now only trying to make sure certain bullet points are made so that you can get a certain percentile on your test or you don't get state and federal funding. We put those teachers and those administrators in a position to have to do. We do that by electing the wrong people federally. We did that by taking our eyes off the school board in the school board meetings so they would have some backup when they say, no, this isn't right. And we did that by not participating with our teachers in saying, what do we need to be doing to advocate? That happened in Atlanta was not just an APS embarrassment. It was not just an embarrassment of those teachers as individuals or those administrators. It was an embarrassment on Atlanta and the ecosystem. We should not have students named, we should not have schools named for George Washington Carver, Frederick Douglass, Booker T. Washington. We should not have these schools named for these people if we're not going to allow these children to truly be educated in the way that these people value. And we, as Atlanta, as a whole, are failing in allowing test-taking to remain the preeminent thing in our schools versus truly educated. I don't have to argue critical race theory because the truth was taught to me at Collier Heights and Frederick Douglass. Because the teachers that I had made sure that they taught me the truth. And it's that simple. So Atlanta, I'm looking for to say, we've made the mistake. This is how we correct the mistake. I don't believe those teachers should have ever went to jail. Don't believe they should be in prison. Don't believe they should have lost their jobs in that way. I believe that the same way that we allowed the Watergate guys to get pardoned, the same way we allowed the Iran-Contra guys to get, somebody should pardon them. If I was a Republican governor trying to win a mayor, I'm trying to win an election, I might just go pardon everybody. You understand what I'm saying?
I understand.
But what I wouldn't do is allow that to remain the biggest cheating scandal when I know what those Hollywood actors did out there in California. And if they caught a bunch of dumb actors, imagine what your real collegiate, imagine what the bankers are doing. Imagine what Trump's children are able to do. Imagine what Biden's children are able to do. So I wouldn't be so hard on us or our children.
So I wanna pivot. I loved your TV show, Trigger Warning. I think it gave a lot of people a lot of things to think about, and it was done in a lighthearted way, but it really was grappling with some real issues.
Yeah.
Most recently, as it's been stated before, you created Greenwood Banking for the future, and so it's a modern banking with Ambassador Andrew Young and Ryan Glover. Tell me about this endeavor.
So it's Paul Judge, Bo Young, Andrew Young, Ryan Glover, and myself. Ryan Glover is part owner, started Noontime Records, went on to start Bounce TV, helped run Martyr for a while, worked over at Adult Swim as a brilliant brother. Paul Judge is out of the tech field, just gave the commencement speech for Georgia Tech last year. Is an amazing brother. Bo Young, son of Andrew Young, an amazing businessman. Andy's never been a businessman. Yeah, he's been Andy's thing. Andy's been a superb politician who brought $40 billion into Atlanta, made sure $11 billion went directly to black business. So he understands the importance of business, but Andy has always understood the importance of small business, small people being able to make small changes, creating bigger change. He went to India, saw what difference a card made in terms of women in particular, being able to do textiles and things of that nature, start to add extra income to their households, not be subject to abject poverty in the same way. Greenwood is going to allow, as a banking platform, people where banks are pulling out. It's not just grocery stores pulling out our communities. It's banks too. And check cashing places and liquor stores have far too long had a monopoly on that 20% they charge you to, you cash in a $200 check like I used to do from AutoZone. Right. It's $40. It's $40. That's $160 and $40 they just got just for being able to say, sign your name right here. So Greenwood is going to give people who don't have the opportunity to bank. It's also going to look to be growing into lending pretty fast in terms of what you're saying, houses, because that's your first form of wealth. We need to be able to buy the houses on the west side. My friend, if he couldn't sold it to me, I would have loved or hoped that he sold his mom's house to a black couple, and if he didn't, damn, So for me, being a part of Greenwood is about helping us become financially literate, helping us to take take the reins of our own financial future. It's about being able to get money to do that cornerstone of wealth lending and houses, and then to fund creative things that creatives may come up with other businesses. I'm proud to be a part of it. I'm looking forward to the technology rolling out, and nothing is the cure all. Because I remind people, if we all do a little, no one will have to do a lot. Greenwood is prepared to do its little in a very big way. I got you.
I want to ask you just two more questions. What is the future of Atlanta and activism?
It depends. It depends. The future of Atlanta and activism depends. I'll tell you this. We have the opportunity, unlike any other city, to put the activists, the political, and the business class in the same room and create a more progressive way forward than currently.
Okay. What's John Lewis's lasting legacy? What will it be? Because I don't think it's done yet.
What's John Lewis's lasting legacy? Yeah. I can't speak outside of me.
Okay.
So I will gladly say me. I've been left, and others have been left. He doesn't have a legacy that's just a building or a street. It is in the individuals he met, he mentored, and he influenced. John Lewis's legacies is Sarah and John Boyd, who are the son and daughter of Brad Boyd, who was a former judge over at Juvenile. Was one of my mentors. Love Brad to death. Still got a picture of him, his late wife, and Sarah and John when we were all kids looking goofy. It's all outdoors. But that picture meant so much that to this day, Sarah makes sure her children knows who they are. And these are white children. And they don't live in the South no more, so it ain't like they're seeing a lot of us, you know? Right. So it means that his legacy in the young people's lives he's infected, myself included, we are his legacy. Absolutely. And now that we're parents, it is our job to make sure that critical race theory ain't needed with our children. Because we done already told them the truth. That's right. They're going to be the little critical race theories in there. We learned about James Madison. Yes. Have you ever heard of John Lewis? You understand what I'm saying? So I am his legacy. And every Atlantan that he has touched is.
All right. At this time, I'm going to pivot and I'm going to start taking some questions from the audience. And so this is question one. So I'm looking on my phone, so I'm not being rude here. This is question
like
one.
Drake when he in a booth. Shouts out to Drizzy.
Yeah. So it says, I love the way you position Atlanta as a place of opportunity. Could you speak more on that and what hope for Atlanta's next generation of leaders?
So my grandmother lands here. She's born in 1932. She gets here in 50. She's 18 years old. She's an attractive girl from Alabama. Her cousin she's living with runs a liquor house. So some days she comes home, her cousin don't want her in there because her old man there. So some days my grandmama's in Dixie Hill, sleeping on her cousin's front porch, get up, go wash off, get out, walk 4 miles to nursing school, go to work, walk back. My grandmother said I didn't like it. She wasn't always nice to me, but she gave me an opportunity. Within 2 years, my grandmother's a homeowner and married. My mother was born in 1959. By 1980, I think my grandmother had paid her house off, by the late 70s, early 80s. My mother got her first house in 19, paid it off by 29. All of this happened as an extension of Tuskegee, Alabama. Her parents did solid when she laid my grandmother. My grandmother allowed all her brothers and sisters to come up here, live with her cousins. Everyone got stable. She didn't make nobody sleep on the porch. She wasn't jealous if she had an old man, you know. So for my family, Atlanta is the springboard. It has been the springboard for a huge family named the Blackmans and the Mackeys from Alabama to set place up in another city and succeed. Now, we moved to St. Pete, to the Bronx, New York, and to Atlanta, and out of those places, from a financial standpoint, the family has been cornerstone by Atlanta. So Atlanta, I am a product of the daring of an 18-year-old girl to move from Tuskegee and not say I'm simply going to get married and stay here. I have many friends now that are from the Caribbean, that are from Africa, that are from Central and South America, that are from up and down the East Coast and the West Coast that tell the exact same story. And if Atlanta can still be doing this for black people, 89 years or so, there's no reason why I can't have hope that we can multiply that number and it happen more. Wow. Stone Mountain ain't even white no more. Yeah, I don't care how many Confederates they got on the mountain. Just 80% black folks, and they from all over the world. They international blacks too. They just Alabama boy. We got them from Ethiopia, Eritrea. It's a beautiful thing to see in this city.
The East Side Riders. It's diverse.
Y'all come on down, man. Y'all come on.
So question number 2. So how do we counter the corruption of the education system, and why is that so important in Atlanta? You've talked about this before, but do you want to add on to that?
Well, I think it's some big stuff. I think nationally we got to start raising hell. We got to start raising hell about test-taking centers versus real education centers. I think that the trades need to return to school. Most Atlanta schools are outfitted for trades. So our girls are going to school, graduating with so much debt they can't even go exercise the degrees they got. Let's make sure that we have some young men and women that may want to go to trades that are coming out welders, carpenters, floor laborers. Because if I'm making good money and I still want to go to college, I can go to college then. But we can't keep outputting kids just to say that you passed 70 percentile of this test. So let's bring George Washington Carver back to the glory of what it was. Booker T. Washington High School produced one of the greatest history teachers I had. He taught at my rival high school, Mr. Edward Johnson. And he also could upholster any chair in this building. And I said, how did you learn that? He said, because at Booker T. Washington, they had to teach you how to use your head and your hands, son. The co-owner of Murray Brothers Funeral Home was my art teacher. This man, I said, man, how did you get into teaching? Well, I was laying a floor for Lester Budge. You was laying a floor? Yeah, I was laying a floor. You had to learn how to use your hands as well as your head. So for me, I would do that first with our public schools. We have made some changes on the school board, and it seems like the Atlanta School Board is getting more determined to be better. But nationally, let's raise some hell, and let's make sure that nationally they understand test-taking centers are not it anymore. From a state level, you got to work with people you don't like sometimes. So people got angry I met with the governor. I don't care, because what came out of that? Yesterday, I left for graduation from Georgia Youth Build, which is not a direct, it's a 501c3. But this program is so good, I went and told the governor, look, you need to do this state. We need to figure this out statewide. I saw 40, 50 young people graduate yesterday, graduate with apprenticeships, graduate with jobs that are going to pay them $70,000, $80,000 and better. And these kids are, a lot of them from abject poverty. Randy and Christine are doing an amazing job over there. If we're ever going to get this as a statewide program, they should be running this. So I don't care who get mad. I'm gonna meet with a couple more governors. If Stacey be the governor, I voted for you. I'm here for you. So what we gonna do? But we have to say, I'm not going to keep letting political differences get in the way of the betterment for my children.
That's right.
Lyndon Baines Johnson signed the Civil Rights Bill. Kennedy wasn't gonna do it. God bless his soul. He looked handsome on my grandmama's wall, but the pretty white boy wasn't gonna sign the bill.
Right.
It took the white man that called you niggas when you left the room.
From Texas.
But he understood when he was out leveraged. Yes. And I think that we have that opportunity here. You are 35% of this state. You have more black people under any gold dome than any other place. Make your politicians do what you wish. I'm gonna give black people that. I don't care who sits in your governor, your mayor, city council, school board. Make them start doing as you wish from a scholastic standpoint, because it's only a 20-year experiment. If we get kids from pre-K through graduation, in 20 years, we can turn the tide of education in this state. Absolutely. And I think it's worthy of doing.
Absolutely. I have one more question. How do you think we can combat the rapid increase in voter restriction legislation?
Well, I don't. So I read just as much Thomas Sowell and Walter T. Williams, you know, as I do Frantz Fanon or as I do George Jackson. So I'm somewhere in the middle of all this. I think that black folks have always figured out a way around it. All right? And I think that right now, the laws that have been passed, but let's figure out a way around it. I'll give you a perfect example. Nina Turner, an amazing progressive, is running in Ohio right now. The Democratic Party, I don't believe, wants to see a true progressive hold the seat of District 11. They're mounting an awesome offense with tons of money around her. The question becomes for me, what are we going to do to thwart that?
Right.
What are we going to do? Early voting started 2 days ago. Get your butt out and vote early. Prepare yourself. If you got a book bag, throw 20 of these waters in there. That way, you just in the line. You're not an organization. You need a water, here you got a water.
Right.
You get what I'm saying?
Right.
We have to do that, and we got to make sure when we go vote, we take people with us.
That's right.
I went to every election since 1980 when I wasn't even able to vote. I was right there on that lady here, skirting him. So that I graduated, if I'm somewhere in another city, my sister said, I looked at your touring schedule, I got you an absentee ballot, it'll be at your hotel, get it back. Because voting was something so paramount in my household, you were shamed for not doing it. We have to get that mentality again.
That's right.
So make a way, find a way or make a way. And until we get that John Lewis voting bill passed, until we do the things that we do, let's make sure that we're better prepared for right now.
So I just want to say this. I get calls all the time. Is when is Killer Mike going to run for some political office and blah 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 blah.
Run.
So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure to talk with this gifted, beautiful brother, Killer Mike. I hope that you have learned something. And I want to say this. As we commemorate and remember the life and legacy of John Lewis, let us always think about being democratic. Let us always try to give the voice to the people. So Thank you and be blessed.
Good trouble, guys. Stay in good trouble.
Good trouble.